Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Third Space Podcast, episode number 52, Super Mario Woes. That's good, right? That's a nice pun instead of Super Mario Bros. Because of the movie. I thought it was good anyway. As you might guess, this podcast hinges around the recently released Super Mario Brothers movie. I just saw it earlier in the week, and so I told Daniel about my thoughts, the good parts of the movie, the bad parts of the movie. But we don't just talk about the movie. In fact, the movie spawns 3 or 4 little mini topics, from how consumers of media identify with characters, whether they should or do identify with their physical characteristics, or maybe they should think more about the actual character of the characters in the movie, their innate traits and their values. We talk a little bit about that in an educational context as well. We talk about whether your mindset can have an influence on how much you enjoy something. If you go into a new experience with a bad attitude, will that actually make you enjoy it less? Does that influence people's objectivity? We talk about video games, as you might expect, since this is a video game-related movie. We talk about Mario games, controlling characters, sequelitis, how destitute the creative landscape is nowadays, and then we talk about the upcoming Zelda game a little bit and wonder whether or not it will suffer from the same lack of creativity. I hope not. Anyway, that's essentially the content of the episode. There's a lot of little bits and pieces, so I hope you'll listen and enjoy. Let's go.
Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello, Third Space Podcast. Good
Well, so I greeted
morning,
you.
Third Space. What?
I greeted you, and you greeted the podcast.
Well, I guess that shows where our
Where our
interests lie.
priorities.
Yeah,
Yeah, think in a similar fashion.
thinking in similar fashion. On the same brain length, as they say.
Yep, on the length of the waves.
Have you seen the Super Mario Brothers movie?
No, but I'd like to, and in fact, I haven't. I haven't.
Have you seen the trailers or anything? Do you know anything
I
about
saw
it?
an early on trailer. I know Chris Pratt's in it. I know I like him, and then I thought that was an odd decision. And then I did see. I mean, it was the first woohoo or whatever, and it was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I got an idea of the quality. It looked like a high quality. They weren't just. It wasn't sort of a. I mean, all movies are a cash grab in some way, but this wasn't just like a. I don't know, direct to YouTube. What would you no one makes direct to TV, but there's something about saying it's for Netflix that would not feel as cool as like a cinematic or a theater release. And so the buzz around it's real. I think it's prime for the nostalgia, and it's current, and I got the idea it would be pretty good. It was my hope when I saw it, and is that similar to your have you seen the movie?
That's why I brought it up. I just saw it earlier this week.
So that means, and you're not one to just go see well, I guess you live close to a movie theater now, so you'll see your threshold for going to see the movie is pretty.
Yeah, it dropped. Yeah, my
low.
threshold lowered because there's one literally walking distance, and on Tuesdays they have $6 movies, so that's what I took advantage of. I went to go see it for $6. So even a pretty mediocre movie, I can justify for $6.
What was your excitement level? Were you curious about this?
Yes.
I mean, it just hasn't been done since the 80s, or was it early 90s, that
I think
movie,
it was
the live
80s.
action?
Yeah, I think
it was
the 80s.
so weird and not really Mario based, but I loved it as a kid when I had absolutely no discernment. And then you and I watched it for our B-movie collection, and I once it's intertwined with nostalgia and childhood, you just love it. And I found it super entertaining and fast paced and wonky and quirky, not something to please the critics. It wasn't in it for the critics, and it wasn't in it for Mario fans, but it was in it for kids. I felt.
I'll put my assessment up front and say that I like the 80s Super Mario Brothers movie better than this Super Mario Brothers movie.
I don't want to hear that.
In a different way, but I think them's the breaks. I liked the old one better than
You're
than
not
this one.
easily pleased though. Like there's a. I'll be honest. When I hear you evaluate a movie or a restaurant, let's say, I don't know what to do with the information, and here's why. Like you're accurate, you're descriptive. I trust you. So those three things I just said is enough to take a review to heart. But just it's not infrequent that I'll love a restaurant or find it tasty and hip and fun,
Well,
like
that's
a good experience,
because
and I'll take you and you'll go, it's all right.
well,
Like,
that's
just
because when you love a restaurant and you think it's amazing, it's because on their menu they said like charbroiled tomato bisque and smoky marinated cheese or whatever. They use these descriptors that really suck you in, and maybe they have like an old palette on the wall that's like stained, with a certain
Yeah,
wood
sounds
stain.
delicious.
And they have Edison bulbs hanging over their bar, and they serve tapas, like that kind of thing, and you're
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
sold. But that's
Yeah.
kind of stuff doesn't it's not gonna appeal to me. Like if their food isn't actually good and worth the money, then I'm gonna go, it was all right.
I mean, I just wonder if I'm so primed to have a good experience, if I'm actually if it rewires my brain to make the food taste better, and then I'm
Could be.
actually, it's not that I'm lying to myself, it's just that I've been programmed, and I'm susceptible to reprogramming. So
Well,
it's not
I mean,
that's
that's
just an interesting thought.
that's a legitimate psychological thing, right? Like mind over matter. Obviously that's not a real thing in all contexts, but your outlook definitely affects your experience. So your perception affects your reality in a way.
Yeah.
If you are positive minded, maybe you have goals for yourself and you're pursuing them and you believe you can achieve them, then that makes your life experience better and you're a happier person. Whereas if you are a victim, if you perceive yourself as being incapable or handicapped in some way, then you're less likely to succeed. So I think there's truth to what you're saying.
Quick side note, just a quick side story that resonates deeply with me, and I had an experience early on when I was student teaching. I was pretty anxious about student teaching, and I think I subconsciously recognized I wasn't feeling well because of my anxiety and not sleeping well. And when I would tell people, no, I'm not feeling well today, or just not feeling it, people will generally cut you a break, and you can kind of cut yourself a break when you're not feeling well, because that's what you're supposed to do. Like no one expects you at your best when you don't feel well, and that subconsciously
Marilyn Manson said that, right? When if you can't expect me at my best, then you can't
dance with the stars, like no one's watching.
Third rock from the sun, something like that. Something like that.
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson, I think.
Marilyn Manson,
famous model.
Famous model with the dress going in the air or something.
Something like
kissing Kennedy, or I don't know. I think you're right though.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Oh, I was
Mario
recognizing. No, one step back. So when I was telling people I wasn't feeling well, a couple things were happening. I actually was beginning to not feel well, and that was becoming a cycle, and it was some sort of twisted narrative I was creating in order to not feel the pressures. Just a bad coping mechanism that was leading me to feel physically ill more often and low energy.
Yeah.
And so I just had to disrupt it and say, I can't. Sometimes if you have a tiny headache or a little bit tired and someone says, how are you doing? You don't need to say, oh, I have a tiny headache, dang it, and I'm a little bit tired. They just shut up sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you should be able to say how you're feeling, but not everyone needs to know about every little ache and pain. And it's like that. I don't know how fruitful it is to indulge every ache and pain. And so, yeah. So anyway, that just really hits home about like disrupting that sort of. So yeah, or the positive, I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of my pursuit, unless I eat out too much and it's unaffordable, which that's where we're kind of at. It's like I've fooled myself into thinking this experience is better than it might actually be. That could be the downside. But if I can afford it and it's why not insist on the best experience and will yourself into having it? That's a cool thought. So Mario Brothers.
Anyway, Mario Brothers. Yeah, I saw it. I would say, I didn't hate it, but it's made by Illumination, the same production company that made the Minions movies, which I've never seen.
Yeah, well, they're charming,
and so it's all CGI, and so it's a fully CGI movie. So that I did a lot of comparison, when I was watching it and thinking about it to the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, right? So another video game movie, mascot, popular mascot from the same era, a lot of the same kind of Easter eggs and jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
And same target audience for the most part. And
And it was live action mixed with the
Sonic was
CGI
live action.
Sonic.
Yeah, mixed with CGI Sonic. But Sonic was CGI, so the main character was CGI. Anyway, so with respect to Mario Brothers, it did some things really good and some things I did not like. I think the best part of the movie and what made it fun to watch was that there were a ton of Easter eggs. Like you could tell that Nintendo was deeply involved in making the movie. There was nothing that felt too out of place. It all felt like it fit within stuff you've seen from Mario and games and everything of the past. There were tons of little references scattered around everywhere. You could see in the background where you go, oh, hey, that's a thing I recognize. And other Nintendo games, kind of like there's a poster for F-Zero on Mario's wall, and one of the restaurants was like Punch-Out themed, and there was tons of little stuff like that.
I really like that stuff. That's fun.
I agree.
It can't intrude too much. I even watched a little thing on it. Like if you're trying to build worlds too much and you lose sight of substance in a compelling story, is often the cost. So.
And maybe there was a little of that cost in this movie, but I wouldn't go so far.
How much do you need the story to be great? Can't you just have him like saving Princess Peach and if they do it in a compelling enough way with some layers, you'd be fine. It's not like we're demanding this intense narrative. So
no, you're right. You don't in a movie like this, the story isn't paramount, but it's a movie and not a game, and so the story is more paramount than we're used to thinking about for a Mario game. Like in a video game, the story is even less important because what's really important is the gameplay. You want it to be fun. You want moving Mario around to feel satisfying and responsive, and you want to have enough challenge to, make you have to actually try, and a variety of enemies and all that. In a movie, you don't get to do any of that, and like the only things keeping you in your seat are the visual spectacle, in this case maybe some nostalgia or Easter eggs, and then the plot, right? Like that's what's keeping you in your seat, and so it's more important in a movie than in the video game. I would say with respect to the Easter eggs, it wasn't just little things in the background like signs or call outs to other Nintendo games. Like there were characters and enemies and other things just from all sorts of Mario games and Nintendo games. Like the Koopas all looked like Koopas. They had the flying Koopas. They had the red shell Koopas, the green shell Koopas. They had they had a bunch of Donkey Kong characters in too, because part of the movie they go to the Donkey Kong Kingdom, and they had the characters from Donkey Kong 64 that like you never see those guys talked about anymore. And they had Diddy and Dixie Kong in there, and they had the DK Rap. Do you remember the DK Rap from Donkey Kong 64?
Yes, I do.
They had part of it. They alluded to it. They didn't do the whole thing. They should have. That would have been really funny.
Though. It's just nice that they even... It was more than a nod, is what I'm hearing. Like the lore was deep and rich and thoughtful.
Deep and like so. I think they did an excellent job, because if you never played Donkey Kong 64, or you only played Super Mario Odyssey or whatever the latest Mario is, and you weren't a big Nintendo fan, you could still enjoy the movie for what it was. A romp through this visually colorful and appealing kind of childlike wonder environment,
whimsical
world of Mario, and you could enjoy it. You could enjoy that, but if you were familiar with all of the stuff, then you would get extra enjoyment from it, and I did get that extra enjoyment. So
when you said real quick, like you said moving, when it comes to video games, like moving around the character like Mario should be really satisfying. Do you think that moving Mario around might be the singular most satisfying character to move around in all the video games in some ways?
No,
or at least maybe definitely the most familiar. But like, do you have a go-to of like just the satisfaction of his like the movement of a character?
So I would have put Mario at the pinnacle of what they call game feel. That's what we're referring to, is how it feels to actually manipulate the game. Super Mario 64 in particular was very good in terms of character control, and then it stayed pretty high for Super Mario Sunshine. Got a little bit worse with Mario Galaxy, but still very good. Mario Odyssey was good too. They're all right around the same level, but I think Splatoon has actually surpassed Mario in terms of. I think that's my favorite character movement in any video game. Like because you can go into the ink, climb up walls. You have and like it's so fluid. There's motion controls for the aiming, so it just takes everything and ramps it up. And it's 60 frames per second, so it's very smooth. That's the most fun I've ever had moving, like interacting with a game in terms of character movement. Very fun.
Yeah, and so how much does and then we'll get back to the movie, but the game like camera angle. I know that the few criticisms that there are of Super Mario 64 is like there were camera issues sometimes,
definitely.
and so they got a lot better
That's true.
I'm imagining game feel also depends on camera angles.
Yeah,
fair?
that's fair because the directional inputs kind of rely on your camera angle,
Yes.
at least to a certain extent, or they can, depending on how you design it. And obviously, you can't move your character if he goes out of the view of the camera. So, Super Mario 64 is one of the first 3D games, and so the camera movement was very rudimentary. And they tried to make the camera forgivably. They tried to make the camera lock on to Mario, and they did that some. But also remember, the N64 only had one joystick. And you had to use those C buttons, the yellow buttons, to move the camera.
They're wonky. Yeah.
And so it was just a lot harder from an input perspective as well. That did improve a lot over time. The camera controls did. And in Splatoon, it's a non-issue really. Like
I know. I was thinking I've watched you play Splatoon for hours. In total, I've probably watched 10 hours of Splatoon. I mean, over the 3 games, and I've never thought about it. That's a good sign, right? Like.
Yeah.
You just never notice any camera issues. Okay, but back to the movie. So they nailed it. That was your highest mark. So you'd say that's the most enjoyable thing about the movie was
absolutely
the lore and the visuals. It sounds like it was colorful and
production value.
Of course, right? Of course, it was great looking.
Production value was really really good. The CGI looked great. I think I'm generally anti CGI, but that's in the context of live action movies. If you're going to make an animated movie, then obviously I'm totally okay with it. It's all about art style at that point. And
I think you could have done a live action Mario with like an animated Mario. Like Sonic fits, he's this creature, and that's how they kind of portrayed it. Is like, oh, here's some people and here's a creature.
Yes.
But Mario, it just wouldn't work.
I agree.
I don't blame them. It's like it was the right decision. Even I wouldn't even want a live action. Like again, it would be too. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so.
No, they made the right call. They did that right, and the CGI looked good. It was very fluid, and all of the settings really popped. Like the castle, they showed some angles that were reminiscent of Mario 64, and you're like, oh, there's the sun dial that you stand on and get a star, and all that sort of thing. Yeah. My favorite scene in the movie, there's a Mario Kart scene, and you probably saw it in the trailer. They're riding their carts on Rainbow Road, and it looks really good, and there's Easter eggs all throughout that scene. Like Mario, he's running from the bad guy at one point, and he like slides his cart and jumps over the side onto another part of the track, which is like a classic skip in Mario Kart on Rainbow Road to like jump over the side. So I really liked that. That was good. But that is about where my praise ends.
Oh no!
So from that point, aside from those things, which are significant, then things turn a little bit more negative. So I guess my most prominent criticism is the voice casting. I thought that every single character, with the exception of Bowser, from the main characters and secondary characters, was pretty bad. Like,
was it star-studded? I never looked. Well, it seems like one of those movies that would be star-studded.
Yeah, Chris Pratt as Mario, Jack Black as Bowser.
I like him.
Luigi was the dude from It's Always Sunny. I forget his name. Not Danny DeVito, but the other one.
Chris.
Yeah,
no,
that guy.
I think it is. Anyway, the little guy, the smaller guy.
Yeah, that guy.
I want to look that up. Yeah.
Peach was some woman. I don't know who she was. Cranky Kong was in the movie, and that was Fred Armisen.
Charlie Day, by the way.
Okay. Oh, okay. Charlie Day, that's it. Peach was some woman I didn't know. Cranky was in, and he was played by one of the SNL guys. Toad was some comedian dude. I don't know. Anyway, those were the main ones.
Okay, so it was big names though.
They were
culture people.
They were big names. Oh, and Donkey Kong was Seth Rogen, and that was the worst voice casting. Every time Donkey Kong talked, I was like, "What is this? That's Seth Rogen." Or like, he's just talking. Like he just got
But
finished.
it kind of makes sense when you just say Seth Rogen as this sort of like deep. It's
No.
maybe too distinct. Is the
No,
problem?
it does not fit. It sounds goofy. You would expect a deep, like giant gorilla voice, and he just sounds like he got finished smoking a bong or something, and was like, ugh. It just didn't fit. It took me out of the movie every time he talked. I was like, you sound stupid. It made me like Donkey Kong less. And then Cranky Kong, who I really liked that Cranky was in the movie and looked like Cranky Kong. I really liked that, but his voice was this like really stupid sounding Brooklyn accent or something, like some northeastern accent that totally did not fit, and it did not fit the character whatsoever. And I thought that was another terrible choice. Mario.
Wait, was Donkey Kong a pal or was he an
Yeah.
enemy?
Well, he was
'cause,
a enemy turned pal. It was
Yeah,
one of the plot points of the movie. They had to
got it.
spoiler alert. They had to gain the assistance of the Kong army, and in order to do so, Mario had to fight Donkey Kong. And
Got it.
then,
That's a fun. I mean,
yeah, it was good.
whatever.
Well,
It
because
works.
the origins of Mario, is in the Donkey Kong game, and he's throwing barrels at him and all that. And so-
Exactly. That's what I was. I was curious how they depict.
So,
it.
yeah, they
did they try to
brought
do
that
any
in.
depiction of 8-bit style like blocky stuff? Did they ever try even to do that?
Not really. I mean, there was some blocky stuff, like the question mark blocks, but they were in 3D. They weren't actually 2D.
Yeah.
So not really.
I didn't know. And I guess I wouldn't even ask for 2D. I guess you can do a 3D figure that it looks 8-bit, like theoretically, right?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
an odd question,
But they
yeah.
didn't. They didn't do that any. So yeah, the voice casting, not a fan. Mario and Luigi were mediocre. Like if I hated Mario's voice, that would have really soured me on the movie. I didn't hate it. It just wasn't that good. I don't know. It didn't feel like Mario to me. And I understand why they wouldn't want him the entire movie going, "Let's go, Mamma Mia, blah, blah, blah." And they did throw in a lot of Mamma Mias, which, they kind of had to do. So,
Like
props to them
catchphrase,
for
right? Yeah.
giving the appropriate nods. It's a difficult situation, but I wasn't quite satisfied with Mario's voice. And yeah, Peach was mediocre. Toad was annoying. So yeah, I was just not a fan of the voice casting.
Charlie Day has a really distinct voice, so I imagine Luigi that could have been. Did you just hear Charlie Day every time, or are you not as familiar?
I'm not
with
as
him?
familiar with him. I did recognize it, and I didn't hate Luigi's voice either, but I just thought it wasn't quite where it wasn't what I expected, and I didn't love it.
Okay.
Here's a plus and minus. The score, the musical score, was
Yeah,
very
it should be easy, awesome.
very good when they did remixes or nods to classic themes, which they did often. Very bad when, bizarrely, they drop in licensed music for action scenes, like the "Take Me Away" song or AC/DC "Thunderstruck." Or
I don't want that.
These other
I don't
songs
want any of that.
that they
I just
just-
want mood music
No.
or like nods to Mario or all of the Nintendo universe.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Like, it was so strange to be watching a Mario movie to AC/DC Thunderstruck.
Yeah, that's jarring. That
Like,
is jarring.
Put in some of the Mario music that's a little higher tempo if you want. And they even did that in one of the scenes near the end of the movie. They grabbed the Invincibility Star, which has that, classic Invincibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not a very good musical theme, but they worked it into a musical theme, and I appreciated that. And I wish they had done that for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, like did they Bowser's Castle and stuff? They had to do like the door or something, and
They
then,
did put in sound effects and stuff.
or
I can't
Ghost
remember.
House. The Ghost.
There was
house,
no ghost house in this one.
There was no Ghost House. Are there any ghosts?
King Boo was in the audience of one scene that didn't matter, so there weren't
Was there
really.
an underwater level of sorts?
No.
Was there? I'm just trying to think of different even like Super Mario style worlds.
Not really.
Okay.
They were in the Mushroom Kingdom, and then New York. That was kind of the two settings.
How did they? So were there human beings that were depicted other than like?
Yes, they were.
Like-
They were our world. That's where Mario and Luigi
Yeah.
came from. Is our world in this movie. So they were
Okay.
from New York. They were real
But
humans.
did
They all
those
looked
people,
like that. Yeah, they didn't look
they
like.
all looked Mario-esque, or did they like
Yeah,
they kept
more or
goofy?
less.
Okay,
Yeah, more or
yeah,
less. They didn't
just
clash with Mario.
caricatures. Okay, that's what I meant. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let me get to. I won't drag us much further through my movie review, but let me get to one of my most fundamental criticisms of the movie. Its pacing was like extremely ADHD. This is what you would expect. I'm not saying this surprised me, but I didn't like it. It was always barreling forward with it never paused for a moment to consider anything or do any character development. Just always flashy, barreling forward, very ADHD in terms of the storyboarding and like multiple times. One time I can forgive, but this movie did it three or more times. These little gags where Mario is, let's just say for example, oh, I'm gonna do this obstacle course, and it shows him jumping around and really doing awesome and wall kicking and swinging around the thing, and then you see the flagpole and he's about to make it, and then the music stops and a piranha plant snaps him, and it pauses right there for a second while all the kids in the audience laugh, and then the scene continues, and the music comes back, and that kind of the punctuation on that instant subversion, like it did that like three or more times in the movie, and that really annoys me because it's just cheap. Like, to me, that reeks of just tackiness in your storyboarding. It's like, oh, you expect this to happen? Well, grr. And then freeze the music and everything while it's like, ha, gotcha. And not a fan of that.
That would be frustrating.
And then the other one that I didn't like, I would say the characterization for most characters was good. Bowser was excellent. Mario was the kind of brave hero. He was kind of a loser at the beginning, but I understand that's kind of how they have to give him some development. Luigi was cowardly, but he's like that in the games. The one I didn't like was Peach, because Peach was totally different than her character has ever been in the games.
Let me guess, a strong woman who like stands up for herself and like
totally
doesn't need no man,
yes,
kind of thing.
Exactly. It was obnoxious, and it wasn't just that she was a girl boss, but like there was a scene where Mario first comes to the Mushroom Kingdom and he has to do this obstacle course. And Peach does the obstacle course first, and she just flies through it with no problem, no mistakes whatsoever. And then Mario, of course, he's learning how to adapt to the Mushroom Kingdom, and so he fails, a dozen times, or multiple dozens of times, and it's funny to watch him fail, and it's understandable. But then after that, after he finally beats it, he's sitting with Peach talking, and he's like, how many times did it take you to do it? And ultimately she's like, oh, I did it on my first try. And it's like, okay, well, that's stupid. Like,
did that serve to the plot?
Nothing, except to say
just sort that women are strong.
It's just women.
I mean, you could contrast it to his failure, and it's just a chuckle, but I don't think that's what that is.
It's the same as in Star Wars when they made Rey able to do everything with no training and never makes a mistake, whereas they make Luke a grumpy old bastard. Like, it's the exact same thing. It's just subversive, just subverting expectations, taking tropes that, whether you agree with or not, were true in the prior material and flipping it on its head. And there's a way to do that gracefully. Like in the Mario games, Peach isn't a pushover, but she's also not this ridiculous girl boss that when Mario meets her for the first time, she suplexes him. Like, it's not like that's what happens in the movie. And it's like, that, I don't know. I just found that really annoying. It didn't ruin the movie, but it made me really dislike the Peach character in the movie. So
yeah, I'm sad. I'm not surprised at all. Like, that they can't just let a girl be a girl like in a movie like that. Like,
well, and they have to make the male characters goofy and incompetent generally. To this movie's credit, at least they had Mario develop into a competent character. So, credit there. A lot of movies don't even do that. Like, I saw the Dungeons and Dragons movie recently as well, which I'm not a fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know anything about the movie. I just happened to see it. And they did the same thing. The female characters were girl bosses that couldn't do anything wrong. And every male character in the movie was a goofy, like, guy that kind of flubbed around. Oh, I take that back. All the white male characters were. There was, of course, one hyper competent black male character that could do anything perfectly and flawlessly. So,
do you think that means when a movie like, and I haven't even seen it, but Top Gun Maverick comes out, that's just like, we're gonna like make some dudes kick butt, and like it's gonna be a kick butt action movie, and it does so well. Like,
oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
It just there's people crave that, you know.
People
and I just wonder why. It's a money making machine. Why aren't they just cranking out what people want? I mean, they clearly do crank out what people want to our own detriment, or shove it down our throats. But like, I guess that's, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that.
People want heroes. They want characters that they can resonate with and root for. And you know, in the past, before all of this forced diversity BS, people could resonate to any heroic character. Like, you know, Aladdin was some Persian dude, but I still liked Aladdin in the Aladdin movie,
and identified
for example.
with him in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Or
That's
the Simba from the Lion King, not even a human, right? Like, it's a freaking lion, and you can identify with that, and it didn't matter. But it has to be believable. Like, it has to the expectations for the character have to fit what your expectations would be in the real world. And when you see a movie like Dungeons and Dragons, and you see, you know, a 5'9" woman who isn't even ripped, like throwing around fully armored knights and stuff, then you're just kind of like, well, I don't believe this. And you see Chris Pine as the main character, like getting his butt kicked and being totally goofy in every scene, and it's like, well, you know, this doesn't. I don't buy this exactly.
Yeah, it's not compelling if you have to deny the visuals you're given. You have to say, nope, what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. Yeah.
And in the Mario movie, it's particularly egregious simply because there's established lore, right? Like Peach is a character that has been around for all of Mario, essentially. And so you know how Peach behaves. And this was not the same Peach. It was a different Peach. Now, was it egregiously wrong? No. But it was enough to be annoying.
I think one of the issues that I'm kind of having an epiphany moment, and maybe it's not that big, it's too strong of a word, but it's an idea that, like, there's this narrative out there that I've bought into and haven't really questioned, and that's we must, and particularly when we're like selecting books to teach to kids, it's like, this needs to be immediate, it needs to be relevant, and they need to be able to see themselves in the text. They need to be able to see the meaning, and this makes sense to me. I'm not critiquing that. Like, we need to be able to see ourselves in the text and in the, like, and in the characters. But if we reduce identity down to some characteristics, like only a few, I'm not even saying they're not important, because I think they're hugely important. I really do. But I think if you just say these are your like 5 basic forms of identity, and in order to see yourself in this character, they must fit these 5 criteria or whatever.
Yep.
Like, I think it's healthy for me to watch a movie with a female lead and see myself in her, and I think it's healthy for
it's a huge
and vice versa, right? Like, the whole point is to see ourselves in others. That's why we read, is to understand.
Totally. It's a gigantic mistake on a fundamental level to reinforce the idea that you can only empathize with people who look like you or are attracted to the same people as you or whatever. Like, it's a gigantic mistake. You should be able to identify with characters of all different kinds of backgrounds. It's their character that you are supposed to identify with, not their physical characteristics. Their character, not characteristics, right? That's what you're supposed to see.
Yeah.
And
what do you think about this then, though? I agree with you, everything you're saying. But generally, okay, the resistant readers in, say, 9th grade are males. Not all the time, and I know, but if I had to do a blanket statement, who are your struggling readers? They're going to be male, more likely than not.
Sure.
And so then I'm tempted to want to read stories that like either have like male characters, or is about like, you know, surviving in the wilderness, or like something that's traditionally potentially like going to I guess I'm saying masculine, or at least it appeals to a 9th grade boy. Am I cheapening, if I were to take what we just said, like, am I being a little too cheap and oversimplistic in that, trying to select texts that appeal to them, since they are sort of dispossessed in a lot of ways in terms of education and reading, and or like, they should be insisting that they they can see themselves in the love stories or things that are traditionally feminized, like love. Like that's so dangerous to me, by the way. It ticks me off that we feminized love and
Sure.
consider it like lovey-dovey, and that's girly stuff. Like
Right.
I want to insist that they see it otherwise. You know.
Yeah, they should be exposed to gay stuff like love too. No, I'm kidding. I agree with your point. No,
It's
I
like
think if
the
you had-
athlete who plays basketball and doesn't read well, which is like or a football player, and you go, "Here's a football book," like, and that's the classics.
That would be
like,
cheapening it. And like, for example, if you had a lot of Indian kids in your class and you decided to read an Indian novel, then that I think would be cheapening it a little bit, right? Like that would be taking the shortcut to try to appeal to them. Now, I think when it comes to masculine versus feminine, you might be able to make a little bit better of a case because, like there's a difference in the hero's journey between male and female, or at least this is something that has been discussed, right? Like the classic hero's journey is really more of a masculine adventure. And maybe the girls are being left out to dry a little bit in this respect, and we need to put a little bit of thought into what an alternative hero's journey might be. You probably know books that fill that niche better than I do.
yes, but it's also I agree that like defining the hero's journey, like I'm comfortable sort of redefining it because the hero with a thousand faces, all the original stuff sort of depicted it as a male's journey, and I think that's like, I mean, just in an archetypal masculine sense, but that all of the concepts of going out and struggling and learning and taking gifts and bringing them back to your it's the sort of like, anyway, I don't want to go into all those details. It's just that I don't see why that needs to be characterized that way. Like this is
You don't
I think
see
it's a
why it
very
needs to be
inviting.
characterized as masculine.
Yeah, I don't. In terms of just being growth oriented, going out struggling, and then using the gifts you gain by struggling.
Yeah, I mean,
I get that. Like, if it's go face the dragon, and the dragon's a metaphor for, and then typically then the hero is going to be a knight or something like that, and that's just a male role. Because as soon as you get concrete about going out there and having an adventure, well, that's been the males historically. So I get why that's.
Well,
sort of,
right.
But
archetypally, it's masculine, and that there's just no way around it. Right?
Yes.
Masculine is the order-oriented sort of story. You venture into chaos, you bring back something valuable, and bring it back to your ordered territory, and that's it's defined as masculine in a way. So there's no getting around that. Does that mean that a woman couldn't take the lessons imparted by the story and implement them? No, that doesn't mean that. Anyone can appreciate those lessons, but I think there may be something to the idea that, well, men typically resonate more with the masculine stories than women do, and women tend to resonate more with more feminine oriented stories than men do. And so if you're trying to gain the interest of boys in your class, then a masculine oriented adventure would probably do it. Now there might be really feminine boys in your class, like you were in school, that would really resonate towards some kind of other book about, like, I don't know, poetry or something. Yeah, that's the thing. You have a whole poetry section in your class, and that's for the girls and the boys like you. And then you read actually good books like The Count of Monte Cristo or something.
Worthwhile.
Yeah, worthwhile stuff. That's for the boys. So
Simple. Yeah.
simple.
Good.
It's very simple like that.
Yeah. So Mario Brothers, pretty crappy.
It was okay. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I would say it's a little worse than the Sonic movies. Overall, I enjoyed the Sonic.
I'm looking
Sonic
at the
movies
Rotten
more.
Tomatoes meter. What do you think the audience gave it, and what do you think the critics gave it?
Oh God, I don't know. I'm not dialed in on this stuff. I would say
I know, that's why it's
I would
fun
say
to ask.
critics rated it poorly. I don't know, 70%, 65%, and audience.
When you
rated
say
it,
poor, they're not afraid to like go low.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Just
In
so
that-
you know,
in that
50
case-
is a good like average.
oh,
so.
in that case, I would say maybe 45 or 50 for critic, and for audience, I think audiences probably liked it. I would say high 80, upper 80s or 90s.
All right, so the critics gave it 57%.
Oh, okay.
And it's considered rotten, by the way.
Okay.
And then audience gave it 96%.
All right, so I was
loved
actually
it.
fairly dialed in on that one.
And it will probably make a lot of
you know
money.
me.
And
Oh, I'm sure it
and
will.
And that says to me that like this is not the sort of quality of something like Toy Story, which like gets
No,
acclaim from
definitely not.
both.
Toy Story had soul.
But that it's a lot of fun. Like if you just go in there and like watch the movie with your brain turned off, you're gonna like have a good time at
Like
Super Mario
Toy
Bros.
Story had soul. It had pacing.
Oh, yeah.
It had lesson. It had meaningful lessons. It wasn't just a flashy romp through
I mean, it had nothing to build off of. It built a world in which we now think of Woody and Buzz Lightyear as these almost iconic, but they weren't iconic. It was just a movie that came out, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, Toy Story was excellent. Mario was not even in the same ballpark as Toy Story in terms of the quality of the movie overall.
Yeah,
Like, Toy
it sounds like
Story.
it was just a good, fun movie is what the Super Mario Brothers is.
Yeah, sure.
Good's even questionable, but like a fun movie.
Yeah, Toy Story I would give like a 9 out of 10. Toy Story is a great movie that it's worthy of my movie shelf.
All of them have been really good, and they haven't like. It's not like they're like, oh, it did great. We're bringing another one out next year. It's
I
like
heard
they've been distant.
I heard that they've really kind of sucked lately because they like made a Buzz Lightyear spinoff, and I heard it wasn't good. And I think they're doing
Oh yeah, that did
some
they
other
did really
spinoff
poorly.
too.
It wasn't even good. Yeah, but that tried to do like was that live action or was it just more serious? It was like the real
I don't know.
person behind the toy was the.
Yeah, something like that. Some stupid
But
idea.
I don't count like what Disney's just like. All right, all they know how to do, like the only way they think is like how to get the money and so how can you tent pole or make a universe build. Like that's the only way they think.
It's astonishing to me how devoid of creativity Disney has become. The Disney and Pixar, which they now
Yeah,
own.
they really paved the way with so much creativity for so long. It's like, nope, we're done.
We're done with that. We're just gonna cannibalize our entire past and make it worse. Like, have they done anything that took from the past and made it better? Literally any one thing. Have they done that in recent years?
I'm just thinking really quick if there's even like I mean, I think some of these MCU things are like really decent. They're not that they're bad individually. Honestly, some of them are pretty good. I mean, I haven't watched so many in so long, but I've seen. I mean, they're not just horrible. But no, I don't think.
Now, I mean, I could agree with you on maybe the earlier stuff, but they're just. I mean, I was
Like,
in the movie
could I
theater just
go
watching the
watch
previews,
Ant-Man?
and there's. Yeah, when I was
And
in the previews, there was like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or something, and I was like, oh wait, this is the third one. Like, I just don't even know. Like,
How about that? Guardians of the Galaxy, I will even stand by saying I like it. Like if you haven't seen it and we were like, I guess if we want to watch a good movie, I probably have a tough time talking you into that. But it's funny, it's good. I've seen it a couple times and I wouldn't mind seeing it a third. And I'd be very curious if you would say, you know what, like that one's pretty good. I'll give them that one because I thought, and the second one was quality. But I don't even know. I don't know if that's. I don't know. It's Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm sure it was a comic book, right? It's all part of the universe. So
I don't
it's
know.
all folded. It's all intertwined in that stuff now. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like garbage surrounding it, but the two are good and are well reviewed, and audiences love it, and that kind of thing. It's the only one. It's funny you chose that example. It's the only one that like I know, and I know the characters a little bit, but I don't know all the Easter eggs that are being dropped all around me. I'm just like, I don't know.
there's just too much, too many of those things. And even putting aside the Marvel stuff, like there's like the Lion King remake, Beauty and the Beast remake, like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, and now the Little Mermaid with Black Little Mermaid, which doesn't make any sense, and like all of this stuff that's just cannibalizing the old classic animated movies. Like, why not make something new? Why not make something new?
What if that's the point, is to not, they don't.
Well,
they're not interested in making new. They want to rewrite.
I think
They
that is the
want
point.
to,
I think you're
deconstruct.
I think you're exactly right. They want to tell people that past is bad. What you used to like is actually wrong, and we're gonna make it better. We're gonna tell you now how you should perceive those things that you used to like, and we're gonna try to make tons of money in the process. Like I think it's twofold. You have the people who are wanting to press particular ideas onto you, and then you have the people who they're just creatively bankrupt. They're empty vessels of human beings essentially, and they don't know how to create anything anymore. And so they know that they have this stuff that people know and love, The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast or whatever, and they can just take that and reboot it. This
Those are
isn't.
kind of like looking at data and testing. They don't actually have ideas or thoughts themselves. They just like
Yeah.
keep running test audiences and going, ooh, this tests well, so add more. Ooh, they like humor, add more of that. Ooh, they like, pretty person, put her in it, like
Sure.
whatever.
Oh, the audience laughed when we did this pause moment, and got snapped by a piranha plant. Oh, let's put in 4 more of those in the movie. It's all that kind of same thing. Like no, it's like there's just no soul to it. That's what frustrates
It's
me.
the curse of sequels, honestly, is that
Well,
the
yeah,
curse
that's-
is that like you create magic and then the second one just is like, oh well, there was one Tyrannosaurus Rex that had a big scene about eating a guy, and let's do 2 of them and eat
I know,
2
that's
people.
Jurassic Park.
Like,
That's what Jurassic Park did.
It literally did that.
That
It's
that's
just
that
like,
was their thing. T-Rex. You like T-Rex? Here's a bigger T-Rex.
he's a super
Allosaurus or
genetic,
something.
yeah, and
Very
so-
frustrating. And that's broader than Disney. Video games do that now, and all entertainment basically does that. Just sucks the soul out of the past instead of making new things. That's why I get very excited when I see some new original idea, whether it's a movie or a video game or whatever. Let me. I had a whole other topic that I was going to talk about today. We obviously don't have enough time for that. But while we're on the topic of sequels, let me just briefly mention that today a new sequel, and we're talking about video games. A new trailer for the next Legend of Zelda game came out today, and I've been really worried about this sequel because it looked like a sequel that took too much from the first game. Right? It didn't bring enough new to the table.
yeah.
And they haven't shown much of the game thus far.
That's what you've been telling me. Like they've been teasing it for like a year. It feels like, and what's the content? What's the content? Like
Right.
there's just some vague things about floating islands, but like I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
so
like literally the same map or something, right?
it is the same.
Like,
It is the same map.
that's really concerning. That's part of the pleasure of a game, I would think.
Yeah, with the new map. But yeah, so it's the same map. They still haven't shown a lot about what's changed on the ground map. Now there are things underground, so there are caves and stuff, which seems cool.
You
and
you
sky,
said there
stuff
might
in
be
the
that.
sky.
Did you already know that, or was that like released today? I
Well,
remember you saying that. Like, will there be underground stuff?
there
that's
were some
big?
clues in some of the stuff they showed that suggested that caves might be a part of the game, and the trailer today seemed to just give a lot more confirmation that there's a lot of stuff underground. There's some big shots of like big underground caves, and it's like, okay, that wasn't in the first game. So there's a lot of stuff underground. There's a lot of stuff floating in the sky, and it showed a bunch of cool enemies, bosses, and characters. And Ganondorf was in the trailer, which everyone loves Ganondorf. He hasn't been around for a while, since like Ocarina of Time, the big bad guy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the trailer was just really really good. I enjoyed it. It didn't reveal too much though, so there's still a question mark as to whether they will be a worthy sequel, whether this new Zelda game will be a worthy sequel, or whether it'll fall into my same complaint category of not doing enough new.
Will you?
we'll
Let's
see.
say it falls into that category. Will you still spend a pleasurable 100 hours or so on the game? Like and not like regret it. Just be a little. Can you be disappointed and still like go have fun with it?
Yeah,
'Cause I feel like that
I
could
can.
happen. Right?
Yeah, I can. I mean, as long as the game. This is what's great about video games is if the gameplay is fun, even if the setting or story is maybe a little derivative, you can still have a lot of fun with it. So take for example Super Mario Galaxy, which is one of my favorite games. Very creative. On the Wii, it was a Mario game, but it was in space, and the gravity played a huge part in the gameplay. Well, then they turned around and made Super Mario Galaxy 2 some number of years later, and it was the same hook, right? It was still Mario in the space levels, and the gravity was still the hook. But they just had so many little micro creative ideas that they had enough to make a whole other game about it. And honestly, Super Mario Galaxy 2, even though it was derivative in setting, I liked it better than Super Mario Galaxy, the first one, because it just had a whole lot more content. It was more challenging. They had a lot of really creative ideas in this one too, so it was great. And I'm hoping the same can be said for this new Zelda game, which is called Tears of the Kingdom. Hopefully it takes what Breath of the Wild, the first game, did and makes it a lot better and more fun. So that's my hope. Comes out next month. I'm sure I'll talk about it after I play it some.
Yeah, I would like to know. Like, and I want to watch it. Like I really want to watch that game. Like ugh. Danielle might even get it, but well,
Maybe.
I'd like. You're very familiar with video games and Zelda, and you'll like. I mean, I would assume that the minute you launch that game, you would be good with the controls and familiar with it. Is that fair to say?
Probably.
Like, and that's part of the pleasure of playing like a known.
Yeah, I haven't played
series.
Breath of the Wild since I played it after it came out. So I'll have to get used to the controls again, but it won't take long.
Is there any temptation to play that or do a
No.
quicker playthrough or anything? Okay.
No,
Do you
and
find it not that replayable? But it was such an
yes.
impressive world, so I'm
Well,
sad to hear that it just.
I have mixed feelings about Breath of the Wild. I really did enjoy playing it, and it was a thrill to explore. It was the first open world Zelda game, and they did a lot of things right. However, my favorite parts of Zelda games have been the dungeons, which are crafted, linear or mostly linear experiences where you get a new item that expands your move set or your abilities. And that wasn't in Breath of the Wild. You didn't have that. You did have some kind of dungeons, these what they called the divine beasts, or I think that was what they were called. And
Right.
they were kind of crafted experiences where you could go through a dungeon, but they were short. They weren't themed individually. You didn't get a new item that let you do something cool, and I don't know. It wasn't the same.
The concept was really cool. These
Yes, yeah, the
giant
concept was
big
great.
beasts, and they're moving around the map, right? If I'm
Yeah,
remembering,
they were.
they were incredible visually and
Yes,
like unique looking. It's just
yeah. I didn't hate
they were
them.
essentially super bosses that were, yeah, I don't
I
know.
didn't hate them, but they weren't the classic Zelda dungeons that I know and love. And that's my favorite part of
It's like
Zelda games. So
you have the beast, but have the dungeons. Have
yes.
the beast and eat your dungeons too, or
And
whatever.
this trailer for the new Zelda game, it didn't confirm classic dungeons, but it showed some settings that really looked like classic dungeons. So
I'm assuming what you're saying is something a lot of Zelda fans are
yes,
saying, like bring the dungeons back, so they'd be kind of tone deaf to
yeah,
just go,
I think
here's
so.
another game without it.
I think so. Yeah, we'll see. I'm hopeful that they fix a lot of the main complaints. Another primary complaint was, if you remember in Breath of the Wild, your weapons would just break all the time. They had durability.
Yeah, you'd have some wooden. It's just like breaking weapons is not fun, and so don't put a mechanic that just makes the game less fun.
See,
And
I didn't have a
I don't know.
problem with it. I didn't. I can understand how some people would dislike it. I didn't have a problem with it. But in this game, in the sequel, they've taken an interesting route to addressing that problem. Your weapons can still break, but you have a special power at any time. You can fuse together two items. So if you have like a pitchfork or something, and you hit an enemy with it 5 times, and it comes up and says, "Oh, your weapon's about to break" or whatever, you can now fuse the pitchfork with something else, a log or a rock or a sword or whatever, and it'll actually make a new item out of those two items, and the durability will be restored. That's how it seems to work anyway. The game's not out, so it's not totally clear. But this is
If they
like,
do a good job with that, there could be countless
yes,
combinations
well,
of
that's the
things.
thing. Like, it looks like it could be just as revolutionary as some of the other Breath of the Wild concepts, like with the wind and the fire and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it looks to be a very huge thing. Like, they showed another thing in the gameplay trailer where you could chop down some trees, take the trunks of the trees, and like glue them together with a fan and make a boat. Like, you can make stuff like that in order to cross a lake. So there's a lot of options.
Here's a weird thought to end on with the idea of the game is that can a game have too many cool things crammed into it? Even if it does them well. I'm saying can it just be too complicated? Like simplicity might be part of the pleasure of a game and the ability to master it. But if you had could you theoretically make a game worse by having so many cool features that you just don't have time to master and explore it? Or is the answer obviously not? You would just play the game longer and master all the things worth mastering in the game.
That's a hard question. I
Like
would
it could
say,
get complicated mechanically, and you have to remember, and it could be
yeah,
unpleasant. Is I guess my point. Like
yeah,
that game feel that we speak of might just never fully be reached because you just are like, oh gosh, there's 75 things I can do with my character that I
yeah,
just. Ugh.
yeah. If you think about it in the limit case, right? So as games become more and more like real life, and the options become more and more approaching what you can do with your actual body. Like right now, we communicate with a video game through buttons on a controller and joysticks, right? And so we have limited ways to communicate with the game. But imagine VR, for example. You have motion controllers, and you can kind of use your hands. You can track your fingers and stuff, right? So you have more control. But you could imagine a situation where the game becomes so advanced that it can track your entire body's motion, and it makes you go through an obstacle course that you physically can't do, right? You're like not actually skilled or coordinated enough to use your body in that way, in which case now part of the game is inaccessible to you because the controller, your own body, isn't capable of doing it, right?
Yeah.
I guess you could probably say the same thing for like Just Dance. You know the game Just Dance?
Yeah.
Or like even Guitar Hero or other games that require a lot of movement. Like if you're a disabled person or a really overweight person or something, these are games that are just kind of you can't do them effectively, right?
Right.
And so if that's kind of what you're talking about, a game that it gets so complex that not everyone can actually experience all of the game.
But I guess I'm talking about it in the mental version, like, if your character has 3,000 special moves that are all actually well programmed special, and like, do you just kind of like, that's a little daunting.
Here's another interesting game example. There's a game called Scribblenauts. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, don't you like draw an item and it'll become it or something?
Yeah, you can type the word in, and any word pretty much you type in, it'll make it for you. So you could type in ostrich, poof, an ostrich appears, and you can hop on its back and ride it around like an ostrich or whatever. And so
and it behaves reasonably like an ostrich,
Yeah, like it has wings. Like there's some, I'm sure under the hood, they attach certain adjectives to every noun, and then in the sequel you could add adjectives to it. So you could say green ostrich, and it would make a green ostrich. And it was amazing, right? Because you could do this like almost to the limit of your imagination.
It's titillating, yeah.
And you use these things to solve puzzles, platforming puzzles and otherwise. And I thought it was really a really great game and very fun.
What a concept!
What it tried
honestly.
to do.
That's so fun, yeah.
But at times it was a little overwhelming because you would come up with certain items that would just fill the niches that you need, like black hole.
That's my guess. Is you would get stuck. You would start to think like wire or cutting. I don't know. You just get stuck on those ideas, and you're solving half the puzzles with just 10 items.
Yeah. It's like black hole.
That's what would happen if you had 3,000 special moves. You'd learn.
You'd learn your
15
favorites
or something,
right?
and then or 5 even. And so, I don't know.
Yeah, and
it wouldn't
maybe
make the game bad. It would just feel like you the completionist in people, which you have to a strong degree, would just be like, I'm missing out, and that would be
part of the joy of a video game is learning everything that it presents to you. And so, say you're Super Mario 64 and you have 7 different jump types. Then you want to master all 7 of those jump types and use them, as appropriate to accomplish the challenges. But say you're playing Super Mario 2064 and you have 3,000 jump moves. Well, now part of the joy of the game isn't learning how to master all of Mario's moves. Now you better make the challenges really fulfilling to accomplish, right? So that no matter what moves you pick, you're still satisfied when you get to the end. So it puts a heavier burden on the world design when you have those infinite amount of moves, near infinite amount of moves.
Yes.
So, wow, we talked a lot. We talked a lot about video games and life and stuff.
Yeah.
So, let's stop doing that now.
Okay.
At this point.
Goodbye.
Dun, 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 dun. Woohoo!